All right, good morning, class. So almost everyone has a cell phone nowadays, and texting is the way we communicate. From adults to kids, it's the quickest and easiest way to get a response from somebody. And texting does have its own language. Some call it text speak, other people call it text lingo, or you might have something else you might call it. When you text, you usually shorten words, use acronyms, or abbreviate. And kids nowadays are the ones that have the higher average in texting activity and who use texting the most. Statistics from CTIA Wireless studies show that teens ages 12 to 19 have the highest text messaging activities, with some teens averaging about 3,000 texts a month and some teens actually exceeding 10,000 texts a month. With so many text messages sent and using this text lingo or text speak, there is a negative side effect to the frequent use of texting and using text lingo. And my proposition is that text language has a negative effect on kids' writing skills. Now, there are two reasons how it affects them. Text language affects their spelling, and it also results in poor grammar when they're in school and when they have to write a formal paper. When it comes to text language, it's easier to shorten words to be faster, to be quicker. That's why there's text. That's how text language got started. And shortening words is a common thing when it comes to texting. For instance, texting the word tomorrow, you would write the number 2 and then MRO, or tonight you would also write the number 2 and then NITE, or you could text that, you would write DAT. And these are just some of the small examples of how students or kids are shortening words and how they are getting confused and misspelling when it comes to writing a research paper, an essay, or a formal paper in school. And according to teacher Carrie Beth Buchanan of Clay Chalkville High School, many of her research papers from her students are riddled with misspellings or written in an abbreviated language, something that you would find in a text conversation. And in her classroom, she could already see the negative side effects that text language has on her students. And that takes me to the effects that it has on their grammar as well. Learning how to construct a sentence and to know the laws of grammar takes years of practice and schooling. According to Shyam Sundar, a Penn State communications professor, if kids send a lot of text with word adaptations, then he or she will probably imitate them. These adaptations could affect their offline language skills and that are important to language development and grammar skills as well. Kids who frequently use adaptations or text speak, when they text, they perform poorly on grammar tests, according to Drew Single, a former undergraduate student in communications from Penn State, and currently a doctoral candidate in Northwestern University. Single also gave middle school students in Central Pennsylvania School District a grammar test, assessment test, then passed out a survey that asked students to detail their texting habits as well, such as how many texts they send and receive. Overall, there is an evidence of declining grammar scores based on the number of adaptations in text messaging, controlling for age and grade, according to Single. So overall, text language does have a negative effect on kids' writing skills. Texting isn't going anywhere, and it is the main communication for kids nowadays, and it will keep continuing to be the main communication. So it is up to kids to know how to adapt and when it is okay to use text language and when a more formal language is appropriate, so it won't affect your writing skills. Thank you.
It's a little ironic that you delivered your speech so efficiently, given the subject matter. I think that you've got a very clear argument. The secondary points, there are only two of them. They are clearly stated. You explain each of those points succinctly. You have one or two good pieces of information on each of those points, and then you finish your speech effectively. It's a 4-minute presentation, so you use only 2/3 of the time that's available to you. So like I said, you got it in there pretty quickly. It doesn't feel like so much like it's abbreviated as it is been edited. It feels like you've left information out. I think you've got a good argument. I think the proof that you offer is compelling. There's a step that's missing here. There's an additional piece of information I think missing on each of the points. Some consequence, some way of measuring it. You have the closest you get to that is a high school teacher who sees this in some of the essays that are being written in her classroom. Other than that, we don't really have much documentation that it is having this kind of effect. Texting's been around for a long while now. I mean, at least in terms of people's history here, they've probably been texting since they were 8. So, it's been around for most of their lives. So we should be able to see some of this impact that you're talking about. Maybe there is some material on how grades have been trending in the last few years. At the college level or at the high school level, are students having trouble passing exit exams on English, something along those lines. Something else that would show that this impact is more than just theoretical or more than something that is occasionally observed by people, but in fact it is really a trend and that we're seeing an impact of it in the culture. The explanation for it is fine. The description of it is fine. The idea that this could be a potential problem, I think, is good. Now the question is, remember when we talked about the criteria of a good argument, is it relevant, is it acceptable, and is it sufficient? Well, I think you've got relevant information here, and it comes from acceptable sources. I appreciated, especially in the second point, that you had some academic research from scholars at Penn State and Northwestern University who are looking at these kinds of things. My hesitation is the sufficiency thing. Is there enough proof here to see that this is going on? And I think there needs to be a little bit more that's going there. That I probably sound a lot more critical than I really am. I'm just trying to show you the things that work, because there's a lot of stuff here that is great. Like I said, it is easy to follow. You explain things very clearly. You cited your sources consistently. I appreciate that very much. Maybe you could watch your eye contact a little bit. I think it's delivered pretty effectively. If I'm just listening to you, you're doing a good job. Watching you, sometimes it's a little more reading than you want to do. And ideally, you'd be a little bit more confident and be able to talk to people. But I know that you've got some quoted material that you're dependent on too. All right. Thank you.